October 2023. A cold morning after a night of rain. The clay field north of Abilene, Texas, still carried the heavy smell of wet earth and fresh earth. The sun had just risen, pale golden light reflecting off scattered puddles, and in the middle of that field, something worth nearly $1 million was slowly sinking into the ground. Tyler Briggs' massive recovery truck. The newest pride of Briggs Industrial was stuck, not just stuck in a simple way. The rear wheels had sunk more than halfway down the mud, gripping them like a living trap. Every time the engine roared, the truck didn't move forward. It only sank deeper. The sound of machinery echoed across the field. The heavy rumble of a diesel engine, the winch straining to a high-pitched whine, the wet mud tearing apart and collapsing again. A few workers stood nearby, hands on hips, staring as if they were watching a slow-motion accident unfold. Tyler Briggs stood beside the truck, his jacket still clean, his boots barely touched by mud. He didn't look worried at all. If anything, he was smiling, a half-arrogant, half-challenging smile. "Just give it more torque," he said firmly, as if this were nothing more than a simple problem that hadn't been solved correctly yet. A young engineer holding a tablet nodded and quickly adjusted the traction control system. The screen displayed all kinds of metrics: pressure, pull force, tilt angle, all perfect on paper. Then they tried again. The engine roared louder. The winch tightened. The wheels spun faster, and the truck sank a few more inches. No one spoke for a few seconds. Only the low, heavy sound of mud, as if the earth had just swallowed another piece of that expensive machine. One of the workers let out a quiet whistle. Another shook his head. But Tyler kept smiling. "Relax," he said. Turning toward the onlookers, "This is $1 million machine. It doesn't lose to mud." That line drew a few light laughs. Not because they were certain, but because they wanted to believe it. But if you looked closely, there was something no one wanted to say out loud. This mud wasn't like anywhere else. It wasn't just wet dirt. It was heavy clay mixed with days of accumulated rainwater, forming a natural vacuum layer. Every time the wheels turned, they didn't just slip. They were pulled deeper, as if an invisible hand beneath the surface was holding them down. The truck tried again, this time louder, stronger, more desperate. But the result was exactly the same. The wheels spun, mud splattered, and the body of the truck dropped lower. By now, even the most optimistic people had gone quiet. An excavator was called in. Then another. They hooked cables, adjusted pulling angles, calculated force. Everything was textbook perfect. But every time they pulled, the truck only shuddered and sank deeper. At some point, a live stream had started. A few people stood at the edge of the field, phones raised recording. Whispering spread. "Did you see that? It's going deeper, it's going deeper." Tyler glanced at a worker's phone and saw the viewer count climbing. He straightened his collar as if this were just a minor show, and he was still in control. "Keep rolling," he said. "We'll get it out." But then something began to change. Not the truck, the atmosphere. Confidence started to mix with something harder to name. No one said it, but everyone felt it, something like doubt. And just as the truck made another attempt, stronger, louder, more aggressive, it didn't move. Not forward, not backward. It just sat there, locked in the earth, as if the field itself had decided it wasn't letting it go. A light wind passed through, carrying the smell of wet soil and hot metal. The engine noise faded, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence. No one laughed anymore. No one spoke. And in that moment, out in a muddy field with $1 million machine rendered helpless, a truth began to surface. But no one there truly understood what it meant. And what would happen next was something none of them would ever forget. The silence lingered longer than usual. No one gave orders. No one offered a solution. Even Tyler Briggs stopped smiling, though he tried to keep his composure. He looked at his truck, then at the ground, as if for the first time realizing that what he was facing wasn't a simple technical problem. And that was when, from the edge of the field, another sound began to rise. Not a loud engine, not screaming metal, but something slow, steady, and low. The grinding of old iron tracks against the dirt. Everyone turned almost at once. From the narrow dirt road leading into the field, an old crawler was making its way in. Its paint had almost completely faded, exposing dull patches of metal beneath. A thin stream of exhaust drifted from the pipe, not much and not thick, just enough to show it was still running. The driver was an old man, Elias Turner. He wasn't in a hurry. No revving. The machine crawled forward inch by inch, as if it didn't care about the chaos ahead. A few people in the crowd frowned. "Is that thing even running?" someone muttered. Another chuckled. "Looks like it belongs in a museum." The crawler stopped about 20 meters from the truck. Elias shut it off. The silence returned heavier this time. He climbed down slow but steady. His boots were caked in old mud. A faded hat shaded half his face. He looked at the truck and said nothing. Just looked at the wheels, at how deep it had sunk, at the ground around it, as if he were reading something the others couldn't see. Tyler stepped forward, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "Sir, this is a restricted work area," he said. Polite but cold. "We've got professionals handling this." Elias gave a slight nod. No reaction, no argument. Then he spoke, his voice low, dry, almost carried away by the wind. "You're pulling it wrong." A few people nearby burst out laughing immediately. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry." He asked, his tone slightly sharper. Elias didn't look at him, still focused on the truck. "You're making it sink," he continued. "Every time you pull like that, you're locking it deeper." A young engineer stepped forward, still holding his tablet. "That's not how soil resistance works," he said quickly, almost automatically. "We're distributing force across multiple points." Laughter came from behind. "Yeah," someone added. "This isn't 1940 anymore." Now Tyler didn't bother hiding his smile. He glanced at the old crawler, then sized Elias up from head to toe. "Let me guess." Tyler said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're gonna pull that out?" With that, he pointed at the crawler as if it were a broken toy. More laughter erupted. Someone even stepped closer, phone raised, waiting for a funny moment. Elias didn't respond right away. He took a few steps forward, crouched down, and scooped up a handful of mud. He squeezed it gently. Let it fall. Then he stood up. "Yes," he said. Just one word. Short. Flat. No emotion, but that calmness made a few people stop laughing. Tyler shook his head and turned to the crowd. "You see this?" he said loudly, like he was putting on a show. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. People think experience means something when they don't understand modern systems." He turned back to Elias, his grin widening. "That thing couldn't pull a fence post," he said confidently, "let alone $1 million truck buried in clay." Laughter broke out again, louder this time. Someone whistled. Another shouted, "Let him try. Might be entertaining." Elias just stood there. No argument, no explanation, just looking at the truck, as if none of the laughter had anything to do with him. But if anyone had looked closer, they would have noticed something. He wasn't looking at the truck as a machine. He was looking at it like a problem that already had a solution, one that no one here knew how to solve. And there was something else, something no one in that crowd, not Tyler, not the engineers, not the ones laughing, not a single one of them realized that the man they had just mocked had already seen what all of them had missed from the very beginning. Elias didn't say anything more after that brief answer. The laughter still lingered faintly in the air, but he had already turned away, walking slowly back toward his crawler, as if everything was settled. Not because he had given up, but because he didn't need to prove anything yet. But this story never really began in this field. And if you want to understand why a man like Elias Turner could stand in that crowd and calmly say something like, "You're pulling it wrong," you have to go much further back, before $1 million trucks existed, before machines could automatically adjust traction, before Tyler Briggs could stand there believing his money could solve everything. Elias grew up on a piece of land that had nothing but dirt wind, and things that were broken. The family farm lay nearly 30 miles outside Abilene, where summers dragged on, and the rains never came when they were supposed to. It wasn't a place for experimentation. Out there, if a machine broke, the entire season could be lost. Elias's father wasn't an engineer. He had no degree, no manuals, no display screens, but he understood machines, not by reading specifications, but by listening. Elias still remembered those early mornings, as a boy standing beside his father in an old shed. Sunlight filtered through the wooden slats, falling across rusted, metal-worn gears, and things other people had long since thrown away. His father would rest a hand on a running engine, close his eyes and say, "Listen." Elias used to think it was just a strange habit, till he grew up and realized his father was never wrong. That 1946 crawler, they hadn't bought it. His father had hauled it back from a scrapyard, piece by piece. No one believed it could run again. No one even thought it was worth fixing. But his father didn't see a pile of scrap. He saw a machine that had been misunderstood. It took them nearly 2 years to rebuild it. No blueprints, no instructions, just experience and patience. But there was something no one except Elias knew. His father hadn't just repaired it. He had changed it. He tuned every gear, every ratio, every small detail, so that Crawler could do something other machines couldn't. Move incredibly slow, but never lose power. A kind of strength that wasn't loud, didn't explode, but could never be interrupted. Fast machines break things, his father used to say. Slow machines move them. Elias didn't understand that when he was young, but he remembered it, and he carried it his whole life. That Crawler had pulled a collapsed barn back into place during the storm of '78, when everyone else said it was impossible. It saved fields from erosion after heavy rains. It worked through seasons when newer machines, stronger machines, had given up. But this story isn't just about the machine. It's about something his father never wrote down, only passed on by doing. Back in the field, Tyler Briggs had called in more equipment. 2 modern excavators were hauled in, each worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Cables were hooked to multiple points, forming a complex pulling system. Engineers stood around talking quickly, calculating force, adjusting angles. Everything looked perfect on paper. "All right," Tyler called out. "We do this together. On my count." The crowd fell silent. A few people raised their phones higher. 3, 2, 1 pull. Engines roared in unison. The cables tightened like drawn strings. The truck trembled. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then, a low, heavy sound. The truck sank deeper. Not much, but enough for everyone to notice. One engineer glanced at his screen, frowning. "That's not right." They tried again, this time harder, faster, more force. But the result was the same. The truck didn't come out. It was being held tighter with every attempt. The crowd began to murmur. "Why is it getting worse? Shouldn't it be moving by now?" Tyler said nothing. His smile had disappeared at some point. He looked at the truck, then at his system. Everything was correct, but the result was wrong. And that bothered him more than anything. On the other side of the field, Elias still stood beside his Crawler. He wasn't in a hurry, didn't step in, didn't try to prove he was right. He just watched. His eyes weren't on the cables, not on the excavators. He was looking at the ground, watching how the mud shifted, watching how the tires sank, as if he were seeing something no one else there noticed. And the truth was, he was. What they were doing, adding more force, more speed, more power, was only compressing the clay tighter around the truck. They weren't pulling it out. They were locking it in. Every attempt helped the ground hold it tighter, and that didn't show up on any screen, didn't appear in any data. "More force," one engineer shouted, but Elias shook his head slightly. No one saw, no one noticed, because all of them were looking at the wrong thing. Then he turned back to his Crawler. There was something no one in the crowd really understood. The machine wasn't just old, it was different. Beneath the dull metal, beneath decades of wear, was something no modern machine there had. A modified drivetrain built to produce enormous torque at near standstill speed. Not to pull fast, but to pull the right way. But that was only part of it. The rest was in how he would use it. Elias opened a small wooden crate at the back of the crawler. Inside there was nothing modern, just a few old planks, a length of heavy chain, and things that looked completely unrelated to a $1 million machine stuck in the middle of a field. Someone in the crowd laughed. What's he gonna do? Build a bridge? But Elias didn't hear. Or if he did, he didn't care. He picked up a plank and walked toward the truck. Slow, steady, unhurried. And if anyone had been paying close attention, they would have noticed something strange. He wasn't acting like a man taking a chance. He was acting like someone who already knew what would happen next. And what he did after that looked so simple. Almost no one understood why it mattered. Elias didn't say another word as he stepped away from the crawler. The crowd was still half skeptical, half amused. A few had already turned away, convinced this little demonstration was about to end in failure. To them, it was obvious if bigger, stronger machines couldn't do it. What could something from 1946 possibly accomplish? But Elias didn't look at them. He walked straight to the truck, stopping near the rear wheel that had sunk the deepest. He crouched down, pressed his hand into the mud, then slowly looked around, not for help, but to read the terrain. He set the first plank down in front of the wheel not to create a path, but to create space. Then another, and another, each movement slow, precise, without waste. Someone in the crowd shook their head. He's wasting time. Tyler crossed his arms, watching. No longer smiling, but still doubtful. You done building your little path? He called out. Elias didn't respond. He walked back to the crawler and started it. The familiar sound returned low, steady, unhurried. He hooked the chain to the front toe point of the truck. Not the strongest point. Not the one any manual would recommend. He chose the point that matched the direction of force he intended to use. That was something no one there realized. A young engineer frowned. That angle is wrong, he said. But Elias had already taken the driver's seat. He didn't hit the throttle, didn't make any loud noise. He just let the engine run, very slowly. Then he started moving. At first, nothing happened. The crawler crept forward, its tracks lightly grinding against the ground. The chain tightened, but the truck didn't budge. A few people started laughing again. I told you. But Elias didn't see a stop. He didn't pull harder. He didn't speed up. He just held the force, steady, consistent, as if he wasn't trying to pull the truck out, but waiting for something to happen. And then, a very small sound. Not metal, not the engine, but a dull, dry click. From beneath the mud, someone nearby frowned. Did you hear that? Elias heard it, and he knew exactly what it was. The clay beneath what had been gripping the truck like a massive clamp began to lose pressure, not because of greater force, but because of the right force. The crawler kept moving, slow, even, unstopping, and then the truck trembled slightly, very slightly. But for the first time, it didn't sink. It moved. The crowd went silent, completely. Not a word. Tyler stepped forward, eyes wide. That's not possible. But it was happening. An inch, then another inch. The mud began to release, not torn apart, but loosened. The crawler didn't roar, didn't try to prove its strength. It just kept pulling, like it had done this its whole life, because in truth, it had. A second pop echoed, this time clearer. The suction was fully broken. The truck jolted upward slightly, then began rolling out of the mud. The crowd couldn't believe their eyes. Some lowered their phones. Some stepped closer. No more laughter, no more mockery, just silence. And something like respect beginning to take its place. Tyler stood frozen, his smile completely gone. When the truck finally came free, steady on firmer ground ahead, Elias stopped. He didn't raise his arms in celebration, didn't turn back to the crowd. He just shut off the engine and stepped down, as if it were just another job. But everyone there knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary, not because of the crawler, but because of how it was used. And in that moment, it wasn't just the truck that had been pulled out of the mud. Something else had been dragged into the light. Arrogance. After that day, the video spread quickly, not because of the $1 million truck, but because of what pulled it out. People talked about the old crawler, about the quiet man, about how an outdated machine had done what modern technology couldn't. Tyler Briggs' name was everywhere too, but not in the way he wanted. Clips of him saying that thing couldn't pull a fence post were shared thousands of times. His confidence became a joke. And Elias, he went back to his farm, as if nothing had happened. Some people came offering high prices to buy the crawler. He refused. Some companies wanted to hire him as a consultant. He refused them too. He didn't need fame, didn't need money, because what he had wasn't something you could buy. A few weeks later, Tyler came to see him. No cameras, no crowd. Just a pickup truck parked outside the farm gate. He stepped out, stood there for a moment before speaking. I was wrong. Elias nodded. No sarcasm, no bringing up the past. He just asked, "You understand why?" Tyler stood silent for a long time, then slowly shook his head. Elias looked out across the field where the crawler sat under the afternoon sun. It wasn't about pulling harder, he said. It was about knowing when to stop fighting the ground and start working with it. Tyler didn't respond, but this time, he listened. And maybe for the first time he understood. Not everything can be solved with force. Not every problem needs more power. And not everything old is weak. People often laugh at what they don't understand. They look at appearances at faded paint, at an engine that doesn't roar, and think it has no value. But there are things that aren't designed to impress. They're built to work, quietly, relentlessly, without needing to prove anything. And there are people like that too. They don't talk much. They don't show off. But when the time comes, they do what others can't, because they understand what others overlook. They understand the ground, the machine, how the real world actually works, without screens, without data, without lights. And sometimes, the quietest things carry the greatest strength. That afternoon, as the sun set over the Texas horizon, the 1946 crawler moved slowly across the field. No one filmed it. No one cheered, just the steady sound of steel tracks on dirt, and a man continuing his work, as he always had. From before, there were million-dollar trucks, and long after they're gone,